Okay, Curt, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. This is Curt Doolittle, Francis, and Martin from the Natural Law Institute. Today is Friday, March 29th, 2024. This is our weekly, is it bi-weekly? Is that what we do,
Bi-weekly,
bi-weekly?
once every 2 weeks.
Q&A, where you submit your questions and we answer them. Martin gives you a short and sufficient answer, and then I waste your time with really long, colorful explanations. So the really Francis and Martin do all the work, and I just show up and do my best. Anyway, this week we have quite a few questions. Yes, how many do we got?
Well, let's see.
Five,
Then
six.
Eight,
I
10.
expect you to ask.
We got more than we're going to answer, is what you're saying.
Yes. We always have a healthy backlog.
All right. So usually Francis reads the question. Martin says if he has anything on it, and sometimes I'm Martin's better at answering questions. Sometimes I am because we have different specialties. Go ahead,
Oh,
Francis. Go
that
ahead.
was me.
You have,
Okay.
you have and you have to turn the microphone on.
Question number one is from Levi. Kant deposits that the pleasure derived from art stems from its perceived uselessness, thereby allowing it to be experienced with freedom from practical concerns. Considering this notion, is a creation of political art feasible, given its inherent aim to convey utilitarian message or serve specific agendas?
Okay, there's the first part, which is that it's a freebie. I think is easy. The second one, I'm not sure. Considering this notion is the creation. I mean, fundamentally, most public art is political. You may not perceive it that way, but it almost always is. Um, Given its inherent aim to convey utilitarian measures. I think when you say political, you might be disengaging or artificially uh, disambiguating politics and religion. And I don't mean religion in the Abrahamic sense so much as the emotion of shared identity, um, and shared mission and of virtue in the values and traditions of the population. So I would say, so I'll answer these two. I'll continue with answering the second part of the question first. Um, and that's that. So that's number one, is that when you say art isn't political, go back. And I've had this, I had a great debate when I was in art school with a very left wing, I should say communist artist, which was not uncommon when I was in school in the 70s. Um, and I said, he kept referring to how bad governments and empires were, except all the fucking art examples that he used for great art were the product of empires. And I said, isn't that a contradiction? Because in order to invest in something that requires a monument, in other words, any work of art that satisfies the criteria for symbolic and monumental, whenever you do that, you're talking about concentrating a lot of capital that individuals didn't have. So the truth is that most art of substance was subsidized and was produced under the auspices of a state for what we would consider um, spiritual purposes. Religious may be too, in the Western tradition, the word religion may be too framed. So let's just use the term spiritual positions. And spiritualism, just as the reason for the emotional fulfillment of the spirit, which is the intuition, which is the provocation of the instinct to run to the obtain the safety of running with the pack on one end and of resting with the pack on the other. So it's running feasting, resting. These instincts are what we call spiritual, and they connect our present experience with our intuitions, with our instincts, and we do that and so the reason spiritual art works is because it makes that safety available to us. I'll get to the aesthetics in a minute, but I wanted to deal with the behavioral part in the sense that religion, political art feasible. That's an interesting question because I would say all art that is we call modern art, which is there's two basic stages. The first stage is when photography comes sufficient that it can replace the artist in realism. The artists have to find new means of expression that will allow them to earn a living. Hence, we get most of the interesting innovations, whether they just be Monet's use of colors um, or the abstractions of the cubists and those people. The second thing is the intentional Marxist undermining of art, meaning the Western spiritual and aesthetic tradition. And so the Marxists have produced which is directly political art, but it's interesting because as all female warfare is, it's seditionist. So it's undermining. So Marxist art is attempt to undermine the Western tradition, just as the Christianity was an effort to colonize and undermine the Western tradition. So we actually argue that when I was, serious participant in the art community, at least in art theory, uh, we argued that art had become entirely political, and that's why it sucked. And today, if you look at the difference in the art movements, if you look, you'll find that regional arts have great influence. The regional areas have a great influence on the art world. The most interesting being that realize I was instrumental. I was a senior management, quite young, in the largest supplier of art um, art supplies in the world. And when you realize that 50 to 75% of the world's art supplies are sold in New York City, and that New York City is the origin of this shit political antagonism, you realize that, and then you go to the galleries, you discover that where that most of the art is really journalism, that's right, political journalism or political propaganda, and it's not in fact art in the sense that it's spiritual and positive and unifying, but essentially it's trying to unify people against the Western tradition and against what we would call high art being the spiritual kind that unites people, that's largely monumental in scale, in scale and influence. So if you went to the Southwest, for example, there's Southwest art. If you go to the Northwest, there's a style that's Northwest. I tend to like this style. It's around ZZ Way, whose paintings can be found all over the Seattle area. I
Wait,
mean,
wait, say again. What's his name?
ZZ Way,
Uh,
WEI.
How do you spell ZZ? ZIZI or
I think
XIXI?
I think he just writes it
Ah,
ZZWEI,
I see. Gotcha.
and he's a little bit like a derivation of Fernando Botero, who's Hispanic, and he makes very large round people, who's also very interesting. But so regions of and Los Angeles, of course, is a great sucking sound for artists because there's money to be made in the movie industry that can't be made elsewhere. So there's regional art everywhere, and so you have this kind of interesting axis between the the historical art forms of the Western tradition, the southwestern West forms, which is like cowboy shit and horses and that kind of stuff. And then you have, those I find it really kitsch, but I mean, I don't want to insult anybody, but to me, it's really kitsch. And then you have the Northwest sort of art form. The I'm of course a traditionalist, so I'm interested in my primary work was sculpture. So I'm interested in certain kinds of sculpture, which are probably in the Alice in Wonderland tradition. There's something magical about them. Um, but anyway, so art is regional, and it's really obvious once you study it that New York and California, being the centers of Marxist or anti-Westernism, are the places where are the places where most of this political art is made. You could argue that the reason we don't like movies today is because it's all political art, and we don't like it because that political art is hostile to the Western tradition. So have I answered the political side of that? Is that, yeah, you can make I mean, all high art is essentially political in the sense that it serves us the spiritual needs of a polity. In other words, the unifying needs of the polity and continuous reinforcement of the norms, traditions, and values of the polity. On the other hand, um, uh, there is seditious political art, which we would call the Marxist attack on the Western tradition, and there is regional art, which does the function of high art for the regions. In other words, you see these regional arts emerge in order to express the regional art as a competition with this hostile art that's being made by the Marxist postmodern tradition. Postmodernists were even worse than the Marxists. Feminists not so good either. Um, so that's part two. Did I answer part two well enough, do you think?
So Levi in chat made a correction. He said he should have written, "Can political art be good?"
Well, yeah, because high art is all political. But what you mean is is editorial art. Can editorial art be good? And so when there so there's spiritual high art, which is the spiritual. There's anti-high art, which is the seditious art, and then there's editorial or journalistic art. Journalistic is a nice word. When we say editorial in the art field, we don't mean it positively. So you when you say, can editorial art be good? I don't know. Is the picture of the girl who's been burned by the is the photo of the girl who's been burned by chemical or fire agents in Vietnam? That's editorial art, right? Is that Can that be good? I don't know. I think it's pretty good stuff. It certainly did its job. I mean, uh, is the photo, we have this sculpture of these guys raising the flag on some island, right? I mean, I think
Yeah,
Iwo
that's
Jima,
Iwo Jima. It's
right?
based on a historical picture.
Right, and it's just a photo. It's the replication of a photo. So is that good political art? I think so. Um, at least for the time it was. Is the picture of the guy who is because I think he just died recently. The guy who's in New York City and he's a sailor and he bends the girl over and kisses her, right?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, VE Day, the
yeah,
one on. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. He just died?
I think he just died.
Man,
I
he
can
lived a
see
long time.
the video of him there. They had trouble finding him apparently. Um, well, now they're trying to demonize that as accident as male dominance. It's
Misogynistic.
fucking sickos. It was God's celebration of joy for both of them.
Yes.
Right? She certainly wasn't offended. Um, And I got to say, from even growing with Maya, I mean, Anna Marie and I went out for a whole year because I grabbed her backside walking down the sidewalk when she gave me the eyeballs. I mean, I mean, flirting is a beautiful thing. I just think this whole thing is out of hand. Anyway, yeah, political art can be good. Is Piss Christ? I don't know if you know this one. Is Piss Christ good political art? No, it's sedition. It's
What?
shock value.
So I intuitively grasp that, but what? How does it actually? How does it actually act as seditious?
Um, it's urinating in a public space. I mean, so when you say when we're trying to produce the sacred, what does sacred mean? It means that it's a commons that you have no rights against, right? You must
Mm,
preserve. That's what sacred means. And so there's they want to justify it with theological language, but sacred means that's ours. I don't have any rights. I don't have rights to touch it. I don't have rights to use it, to gain benefits from it, and I certainly don't have rights to harm it. But that means both physically, informationally, and spiritually. And so we produce sacreds, right? Because they are representations of what makes us unified. Well, what does hostility to the sacred do? Well,
right.
hostility destroys the sacred that is meant to unify us in order to create divisions against us. So it's an act of aggression against the polity. And people do it. Well, here's why they really do it in the arts, because they're suck. They're shit. They can't get attention by making truth, excellence, and beauty, in other words, contributing. They can't make it by insight, so they get attention by shock value. And so it's defecating in public, and because and so it's seditious against the people.
What about in India, where defecating in public is tradition?
Why did I know you were going to go there? The minute I heard your voice, he's going to bring up India. Um, uh, they've made pretty good. They've made some serious progress against that, by the way. The problem is they're. I don't want to go into that. That's not. We're in a beautiful topic right now that is quite wonderful to discuss. So I would so the the issue here is there's a I'm going to tie the political and back to the economic that isn't stated here before I get to Kantian. The second thing is the economics. So let's talk about the economics of being a painter or a sculptor. Let's say that I need to make, what do you think it would take to make a reasonable living as an artist? What would be the minimum amount of income you would want to make in order to make it worthwhile for you to spend all the time? A painting is easy to understand. So on a painting, would it be $20,000 a year?
Well,
Would
I'm
you want to live?
guessing at least medium income, if not more.
Right, you would want to make median income. Okay, so that's like, let's just say that today that's $60,000. All right, so now if I'm a print artist, right, and I can make 1,000 copies, what can I sell those for? Well, hundreds of dollars, right?
Hmm.
Right. If I'm a painter, they're one-offs. So if I want to produce a painting, I can produce, some kinds of paintings in 3 or 4 days or a week. But I might be able to do some of those paintings 3 and 4 at a time, 3 or 4 days in a week. But can I create marginal difference by doing that? In other words, can I create a style that's representative of the moment in space within the movements in the arts that are available? How much time do I got to spend on that? Well, I mean, you've got to spend a couple of weeks to a month on a painting, and you've probably got to have X number of them going. Now, the second thing you've got to do is you've got to have inventory to market. So how many galleries will carry you? Well, you need more than one gallery. If you're in one gallery, how many paintings do you need to have in the gallery at a time to be able to create a sale? It's not one,
At least three
not
or four,
two.
maybe.
It's three. Sometimes they do 12,
Oh,
right? You want an inventory. Now, of that inventory of, let's say 12, should probably, that's 6 is still too low. Let's use 12. No, I want to be more forgiving, so let's use 6. So let's say I've got to have an inventory of 6 paintings. All right. Now, that means I've got to put 6 paintings in every gallery. Right. Now let's say I can support 3 galleries. That means I have to have 18 paintings. Right. Of those 18 paintings, what percentage of them are going to sell in a reasonable amount of time? Let's say within a year to a year and a half. Well, half to 2/3.
oh, I was gonna say 10%, but okay.
No, it's more than that. I mean,
All right.
this stuff doesn't. I mean, I tried to buy a ZZ Way a couple of times, and they're fucking expensive.
Yeah,
And you,
I just you didn't see this, but I posted the link to ZZ Way's gallery on there, and these painting, I think they're average about $30,000 to $40,000 a painting. And looking at the theme, he seems to be in deep love with the Palouse area because I see a lot of that scene.
yes, correct. So, so you just gave. When I was in college, it was 25 grand. You had to sell a painting for 25 grand, right? In order to make a living. In other words, in order to be in galleries and to have your paintings turned. There are people who sell $1,000 paintings. There are people who sell less than $10,000 paintings. But of course, what you want is to be in the $25,000 paintings, because then you can make a living. One of my relatives, and I'm not making a statement about her art, okay? One of my relatives, Doolittle, right, paints this goofy Western scenery stuff, right? And it's usually got an optical illusion in it. So if you look at a bunch of birch trees and there's like a wolf or something in there, you see like an Indian head pattern in the blotches on the birch trees. Like you probably, it's Beverly Doolittle. You want to search for
Yeah,
Bev.
I searched Bev Doolittle. Yeah.
So if you look at her house, I mean, they live in a very esoteric mansion, right? I mean, it's custom built house. It's very esoterically built and designed, right? I don't think there's a straight line in the fucking thing. Um, anyway, so you can make a good living at that. ZZ Way makes a good living at that. I can't list all the people because I'm not involved anymore, but you can make a living at it if you can sell the paintings or works that are above the $10,000 mark. You certainly want to get in the 25, 30s.
It,
After that, you have to have been a symbolic of a movement and have had your works show up in what are called canons, basically magazines or books or shit like that. Or and those things go for hundreds up to the millions, tens of millions, and hundreds of millions of dollars. But generally, if you want to be an artist, you want to get out of the 1,000 into the 10,000, and if you want to get above the 10,000, if at all possible.
so looks like your relative, she sells her paintings in the thousands, but they are not really paintings, but rather prints.
Prints, right? Exactly. So that's the. So I'm just trying to stick with. Uh, it's too easy. It's harder to see the difficulty in being an artist when you don't look at something like paint or sculpture. Like how many I can do more paintings than sculptures. right? I can do very few sculptures. If I want to do a monumental sculpture, it's like I have to go out for bids, right? And these things cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to make. Like I look up Calder, in his sculptures, Calder. Um, so when you talk about the economics of being an artist, a painting will cost you a couple of $100 to produce, $100 to a couple of $100 to produce, and it will take you from a couple of days to a couple of months to produce. When you do a couple of months to produce a painting, what's happening is that you have to let like layers dry, right? And you may also not know, it's not, you can sit down and say, I'm going to finish a painting. You start six of them, right? And you do a bunch of drawings. You start six of them. You throw three of them away. The next three you keep, and maybe you add another one or two to it. And then you say, okay. Then you just stare at the fucking thing. Excuse me, I just swore again. You stare at the thing for an hour, and you're like, okay, that feels right. I want to do that, right? So it's not like this. This is somewhat like programming. There's like, I don't know how to fix this fucking thing. What am I going to do? I got to think of how I'm going to solve this problem for a couple of hours, and then I'll figure it out. But so, as an artist, you got to foot out a lot of money to supply galleries with enough stuff that people who are in the buying phase see it enough that they can develop the aesthetic for it, right? That people will report on it and comment on it, which will create canon for it. In other words, justify consumption by the buyer. And then you've got to have the person think about it and then sell. Like I bought art, like I know what I want to buy because I have a particular taste, and I'll go out and search for something. Other times you're just in a place you said, I have to have that, right? But I have to have that is great when you're buying what I do, which is $1,000 and under, versus when you go out and you say, okay, this is 30 grand. You don't drop 30 grand. Although Microsoft has one of the largest art collections.
Yeah,
And
I realized that. I think even Bill Gates at one point said something about the Microsoft art collection. Uh,
it's
Tucky,
bought by a community inside the corporation, and it's usually displayed around the
yeah, around the
offices.
buildings. I don't know that they demolished all the old buildings, right? And then they built this new modern campus, which I have not been to. When we
Where,
were
where,
in the older
where?
the main campus,
Where?
when you come up here, I'll
When
show
did they
you.
demolish
They got rid of building 8, 9, 10. Those X-shaped buildings that people always
the
complain about. But those have the maximum windowed office ratio of any modern office
That's
building, which is
right.
why I loved it.
Yes.
But they nuked
Yeah.
them all and then putting these like basically soulless postmodern architecture shit.
Oh shit. I was in 8 and 25. Those are my two buildings. And 25 was in just after it was built. But Gates was just he was
Right.
he was in it
He
at
was
the
in
time.
building 8, wasn't
I
he?
think
Or
it was
something?
8. Am I
I
am I wrong?
don't know. But wasn't 25 the one with MSNBC or something?
Oh, that was
There
after
was a
me.
studio. Oh, okay, yeah, probably.
I was there. I was there a long time ago.
So Takizakura 123 says public commission supports some artists, and that actually reminded me that in Japan, the government actually supports some of these artists, especially in terms of traditional art. They have these cultural heritage. There's some dudes that still makes the old Japanese style bamboo
There's a
bow,
reason we
the
we love
handcrafted
Japan.
way.
There's a reason why I say if Germany doesn't do it right, go to Japan, and Japan will definitely do it right. The problem is that the art community in the U.S. is female and postmodern, and so you see most public art is shit. And
Sometimes,
go ahead.
sometimes literally.
All right. So can I answer the first? Have I answered the political question?
Uh,
Just before we
uh,
move on, I just
No, I'm not done yet. I want to make sure I can answer political, economic, and
yeah,
aesthetic.
So
I still,
Levi
yeah.
has a question. So Levi
Yeah.
said, "Isn't art with intent design and not really art?" Oh, okay. Isn't art with an intent design not really art?
What?
How do you produce an art without intent? Accidentally?
Well, okay. Let me get to the aesthetics to answer that, okay? I'll answer that with the aesthetics. So the basic issue is you can have political art, you can have essay, you can have sedition, you can have the sacred and the profane, right? That's easy to judge. Then you have the economics of being an artist, and you're talking about fronting a lot of money with with a low turnover. In other words, it takes a long time to sell, and with only partial turnover. In other words, some number of your pieces will not sell, and so some of the products will fail. Um, okay, so and that's worse. That's worst with sculpture, less bad with painting, certainly better with print, and then craft like clay, which I know quite a bit about. Um, I know most of these things. Uh, Clay is something you can produce in relatively large volume because while there is art that's done as sculpture in clay, and this is the people that get all the attention in the community, by the way, there is also craft. And craft is there's the craft has uh, less uh, political and sacred content, and it tends to have more aesthetic or design and craftsmanship content. And whereas high art generally has all three, it has some sort of sacredness or political, or we call meaning. It has craftsmanship, and it has design elements in it, appeal to aesthetics. So you get down into craft. And then there's kitsch, which is we call art from the art of the home, right? And then there's student art. Unfortunately, what you see when you go to a lot of galleries is really student art, because the supply of artists worth seeing, and the supply of people who want to run galleries is off. One thing we learned when my wife and I decided we were going to try to build a gallery is we did our research, and I visited every gallery on the West Coast, from Seattle to San Diego. And you know what? How long it takes a gallery to make money on average? 11 years. So
Wait, what?
it takes 11 years before you make money on average.
Then why do people get into this business?
It's a status, social and status thing. I mean, one of the reasons I studied art is because it's a fuck you degree. It's like it's the most effete, a pretentious, arrogant, fucking useless degree you can have, which suits me perfectly. So anyway, um, the next thing is Kant posits that pleasure derived from art stems from its perceived uselessness. This isn't correct. Certainly, art includes the crafts, right? So we have artistic work in craft, and um, we have artistic uh, uh, or aesthetic production of, say, architecture, which is considered the highest art, because it's the most expensive. And you can have uh, this uselessness is there. The reason something has pleasure in art is its design or aesthetics. Now, aesthetics is interesting, and it's really easily explained if you say, I'm going to be a hunter-gatherer in 8,000, 7,000 BC. And we're just trolling the coastline because we control the coastline, and we know we can always feed ourselves with fishing. But of course, we want meat, especially meat that can be dried and travel with us. So, but when as we're going along and doing our fishing, we find a cave, right? We find a cave on the coast. And, we're kind of nervous, so we throw some fire in there and stuff to make sure nothing else is in there. But we go in there and we clean it out a bit, right? And we say, well, let's stay here and do some fishing and hunting from here. Now, that place is scary, right? But what happens if I draw stuff on the walls or I paint it? Now compare that to you go and you live in you got in a new apartment and it's blank walls and no furniture. And then you bring in your furniture. What's happening when you make a place your own?
Well, you make it more familiar to yourself and therefore claiming the territory.
Correct. And so um, now, if there's evidence of people before you, evidence of the hand of man, there's two kinds of evidence. We could do two ends of the spectrum of the hand of man. Somebody before you has been in that cave, and instead of finding it empty, you find it highly decorated. Now, how does that make you feel?
Like you're invading someone else's space.
It could. It could also make you feel like it's safe, right? Now, so I'm trying to give the simplest examples I can here, so don't beat me up too much on the. But if you go in there, so there's evidence of hand of man. Now you're this hunter gatherer now, and you stumble upon a development where there's actual architecture. I mean, stone buildings and stuff, which is what would have happened if you were in the north of England. Uh, what happens when you find these elaborate architectural places? That's evidence of the hand of man. Now, what is different about the evidence of the hand of man and the evidence of the hand of nature absent the hand of man? It's order. And so when you go to a place, you see order. Now, this is interesting to me. When you give a monkey, what's the one? Brad uses this one. You have two monkeys next to each other. You give one, I can't remember what it is, a peanut or something, and then you give the other one a grape. The monkey you gave the peanut to will slap you and say, no, I want to, because he wants a grape instead, because a grape is better. The same thing for most animals. They can tell the difference in caloric content of food. And so they'll favor the thing with caloric content. Similarly, humans will see evidence of the hand of man as order and the quality of order. In other words, the third of it, and I'll explain why, as the equivalent of more calories, more investment, more capital. And so what's really happening is when you're looking at art, you're seeing two things: a pattern made that's identifiable as capital, right? Right? Human made capital. And you're able to judge the amount of capital that went into it. So if you go into a wood hut, that's better than a grass mat. And if you run up against an Egyptian temple, right, these colossal sculptures, the emotional impact is overwhelming. That's why they make them so tall. It's to make you feel small, which provokes your submission response, which provokes your submission to the pack response, which promotes your perception of the sacred. So when you say pleasures derived from art stems from uselessness, uh, it's that there's nothing that's useless in what I described there. There's a measurement, which is the caloric content of the thing, right? There's the caloric content as order of the thing, and there is the scarcity of the thing. And when you combine those together, humans are looking at the grape versus the peanut and choosing the grape. If if it makes you feel safe, a cave that's been decorated by you, then it's got more calories associated with it, but it makes you feel safer and more spiritual. So one thing we say in our work is, um, all human behavior is the result of acquisition. In other words, all human behavior is directed toward acquisition. What you're trying to acquire varies, might be rest, but the rest of it's just it might be friends, it might be food, it might be status. It doesn't matter, but you're always trying to acquire something. And so there's a relationship between all this caloric order that's being produced and it. And then there's another dimension, which is this alien, which you brought up as if I go into it, it's decorated by somebody else, but maybe it's decorated by other members of our tribe, which means it is safe, or it's hostile, which it means it's decorated by people who are hostile to you. It's unsafe. So what you're getting from this is this beautiful collection of pleasure of the presence of resources in a condition of safety. That's all it is. That's all it is. And so that's why I say, some people have really bad taste in art. But why is that? Well, it's a skill like anything else. It's from, my favorite example is I have a friend whose wife buys pictures of horses' heads, right? I mean, I think it's tacky as fuck, right? But it makes her happy, right? Because that's an association she has. Well, is that art or decoration? That's decoration, right? There's not but if so, because that's an associative aesthetic. If you had said, okay, I'm going to go and buy, the Mona Lisa is an interesting one because it's not really attractive. It's a technological innovation, right? So that's like the smartphone equivalent in art.
What's the technological innovation in Mona Lisa?
Oh my God, I'm not going into that lecture right now.
Okay,
But
you're talking to someone very uneducated in artists.
okay, good. But so it's an innovation. Um, when you look at the evolution of sculpture, you look at these very straight Egyptian pictures, and then you look where they have 1 foot forward, but the weight of the figure doesn't move. In other words, it do the same thing in their drawing, right? I mean, the foot is forward, but the weight isn't forward. So that means the forward foot is longer than the other. I mean, however, then you get to the Kouros boy, which is the Greek model, and it tries to fix that. And then you get to Michelangelo, where it's hard to understand how he made stone fucking do that because the weight is there. I mean, look at the canonical example is David, where he's got the contrapposto stance based on weight on one hip. He's turned. He has his shoulders set, right? And so you have this full representation of weight. But that evolution took many centuries to get there. So that's a technological evolution in art. The same thing for 2D representation of the world. I mean, the world before perspective is kind of funny compared to the world after perspective or drawing. The world of painting before the use of camera obscura and a lens over one eye, which is how Vermeer painted, why his stuff looks so amazing, is different from the periods before that. In my lifetime, when we used projectors, so we would just draw stuff out, right? And you put a grid on it, right? And then you put the grid on the canvas, and you scale up the monumental painting because there's lens distortion, so you have to put this grid out there. But there's lens distortion, and then you scale this up, and you get these monumental paintings that are realism. And then you get the guy who does, I can't remember his name, Chuck Close, who if you look at these monumental paintings of these heads, right? They're just individual heads, and they're just people, the shoulder up, there was some facial expression or not. You just look at him. He's made a dot. He's made the colors like we use pixels, which is a dot of color within a color and then within a color inside it. And so I think I hope I'm getting that Chuck. I'm not confusing him with someone else, but I think that's Chuck Close. So when you get into this stuff, you see that it's a technological advancements continuing opposite. The problem is, what happens? What do we? Just as Christianity disconnected us from nature and made us become degenerate abstractionists, spiritualists, I'll say. I'm trying to provoke a response here with the audience. Just so art has done the same thing. Is that the Marxist postmodernists have tried to disassociate us from nature, whereas most of art, in our traditional sense, reconnects us with not only nature but with our culture and with our history and with our mythology and with our religions. And so they've tried to undermine all that. So now we get this political crap. Now, Piss Christ is my favorite example. But even who's the guy? Mapplethorpe did this white and black homosexual type photography, right? It was a scandal when it came out originally. But you don't see art having much influence today. It has almost none. It's amazing. You have really great artists coming out of Russia still, because you need a poor country to make a good artist. Because it takes
Just the
so long.
economics.
It's just the economics of it. Whereas you have to produce art today that you can produce relatively quickly and cheaply in order to survive in the present society. So I think I've answered both the first part and the second part of the question, and that was a really long
Yeah.
answer. So I hope that
I still find it interesting that the communist art is seditious. That once the communists were actually controlling Soviet Russia, you start getting these really masculine statues that go back to Western tradition, almost fascist.
they're underclass though.
Working class, that I have no problem with giving some appreciation to the worker.
I don't think anyone does. It's not appreciating the workers, it's that the workers are superior. Are superior, that's the problem. Instead of saying unify, because the Western tradition is basically, so you can see it in the Indian tradition versus the Western tradition, is that they encountered a bunch of people because that they were too numerous and were from a very different gene pool, and so they kept their step herder military hierarchy, but they turned it into a class structure defended by religion. So that's how they unified people. In the West, we were not in that position because the aristocracy could conquer and manage the people the territory that they were in. And so they created a system where people could climb the ladder. So India made it so you were stagnant, and the West made it so people could climb the ladder, because there's always a shortage of these people at the top if you're growing. So these different traditions work in different, and people have to do what's necessary. Okay, I feel like I talked that one to death. I think, was that informative though? Was it informative? Did I do okay, Francis?
Gives me a new appreciation of art.
Well, good. That's good.
Well,
So Levi, thanks for the question.
Levi asked, Curt, do you like Lucian Freud? Freud?
Who?
Lucian Freud? Freud?
I guess that means no.
I bet it just doesn't come to my mind. Let me pull it up real quick. I kind of doubt it. I don't really think. I mean, if you ask who I like, oh, Lucian Freud. Yeah. Well, I mean, do I like it? I do. I like it. And it's the study of the human form. And if he wants to get really big fat chicks, that's fine with me. Right? I don't care. That's actually a tradition, because we have to remember that through most of human history, a fat woman meant a rich woman that was fertile, because most women were skinny, right? And so, um, yeah, I know him. So you go from what you're saying is that he's riffing off Fernando Botero and going into Lucian Freud, and the difference is more abstract versus more realistic. I don't know. I mean, I look at an artwork and I see, I interpret the meaning and the culture that the value, the meaning and the values the artist has put there intentionally or not, and I look at the craftsmanship, um, and a little less so the composition. Uh, I'm not so as bound by composition.
I
It's
just
like
can't help but to laugh that this painting of fat chick sold for $52 million in 2015.
okay. So here it's a game, right? You are trying to get your work talked about, right? And published somewhere to give it legitimacy so that people will pay for it, right? And the second thing is it matters how big it is, a lot. So if you make an 11 by 14 painting, you're never gonna do it. But the minute you surpass human size, what we call bank paintings, right? Stuff that has monumental effect, you've gone somewhere. The second thing is, what is the meaning it's conveying? Now, the neutral one is landscapes. The less neutral one is humans, right? And the much less neutral ones is symbolism. So in this case, he's basically doing, going back to the long tradition of European art that has chunky women in it. Trying to think of what's her name reclining, that name that painting. He's just doing that. He's made a living off it because his painting is realism. It's monumental. It's basically what we call the virgin theme, the mother theme. And you can put it's not offensive. You can put that in a in a museum or a grand home, and it'll fit.
All right, shall we move on to question two?
Yep.
All right, question two from Daniel. With all the discussion of demographics and even eugenics, what's the Institute's position on whether the state be involved in the matchmaking process of a potential young couple, neither directly or indirectly, specifically for those that are willing to use such services? The main justification for this would be to form families and increase the birth rate, as well as not waste years or even decades or more searching for a suitable partner if an individual is interested in starting a family. As today, there are many of those private online matchmaking services and apps available, although they have low success rate in family formation, and in-person meeting services are far and few in between and often very expensive. One example of a service the state website could provide is many women those days want a man that makes at least 100,000 a year. If the state had a website where she could verify this information, this would potentially save a lot of time for her in her search for what she deems a suitable partner. Such a site could be used to verify if a man has any children already, previous marriages, degree obtained, or any other significant achievements or titles, and that are vitally important that a standard background does not provide today. This site could also be used by men as well as to check the woman's background. There could even be an AI tool that tells people based on their profile what their likely matches are. Another idea might be to state sponsor social events for single young people to meet at least a few times a year with people that meet a certain minimum set of criteria to qualify for the event. There may also need to be limits on this so people don't just keep attending them indefinitely at the expense of the state. And another mechanism in place to keep out bad actors who are just there to try to find a hookup for a night. The event could be formal settings, such as a ball, or even much more informal, such as the daytime activities that involve something like a camping for a weekend. The last part sounds a lot like what these like high society balls back in the days. Anyways, I'll let Martin answer.
Well, I'm not necessarily that bad of or against this existing, but the reason people aren't mating isn't lack of algorithm that would find them a perfect mate. Such perfection isn't even realistic. Perfect relationships depend on training, shared experience, environment, and social and financial incentives on top of genetic compatibility. And we need to fix all of those. And if we do, such algorithms may prove largely unnecessary. For that matter, you might look up Keeper if you haven't heard of it, as that may already be what you're thinking of. By the date is trying to do this for a specific demographic, as do various Christian dating sites. I don't know about their success rates. Social events are of course desirable, but we should be having those in any case for all sorts of religious, national, and local festivals.
What just happened? Where are you? Yeah, I'm gonna. Martin's correct. It's the problem is mostly that people are are trying to find mates in outside of the region where they grew up, and who have and who lack the basic shared experiences. That's number one. This is because of the tendency of young people to go to college, especially women go to college that is shit, doesn't mean anything, and then going to cities to try to find work to pay for this college that did nothing for them. And then when these cities entering a heterogeneous environment. Where I live in rural areas, this problem doesn't exist because people don't use dating sites. So and it doesn't happen where people don't go. It happens far less with people who don't go to college than people who do. So I'm saying you're having it. So there's a lack of there's a lack of shared foundations, morals, ethics, and manners. The second thing is, Martin, what did you say, Martin? How you say it? Is that they're trying to buy a mate like they're shopping on Amazon.com on these websites, rather than identify someone that they are willing to work with together to produce a relationship and family. And third, there is a drop in economic potential for the existing generations. And fourth, women are nuts because because they think shopping is possible, because they overstate their value, because there's an overeducation of women into white collar jobs. They're going to disappear soon, by the way. And there's an oversupply of men in blue collar jobs, and a destruction of the higher levels of engineering, basically, that kept most of the better men that they might want to employed in a white collar but productive capacity that's been offshored enough. So you have a real set of disruptions going on in the marketplace that are really contrary. If you add that to the hookup culture and that social media and dating sites are facilitating hookup culture, if you add the availability of OnlyFans for both type things for both sexes, and the availability of pornography, what you've got is a transformation of looking for a best friend to build a family with over a lifetime. Instead, you're trying to basically shop for something that already exists and it's been built for you by accident. So that's the broad spectrum of it. And I'm not going to go into how women have destroyed education, the workplace, and politics by their instincts, because they don't know that what they feel is good is actually bad, because it's an instinct that they needed to bear and raise offspring in an environment of perpetual scarcity. And they've run into, women are actually demonstrating the mouse utopia more so than men. And so women are trying to perceive a world where they have a lot of choices, much closer to the mouse utopia failure. So that's like the way that's the box in which this is happening. And of course, it's all coming to an end right now. So we'll see what happens on the other side of it. Also, people are adapting to it. You're seeing the men, women impulsively, fashionably adapt in time, but men understand and educate one another and react over time. So you're getting this weird equilibrium happening where people are realizing this problem is real. And then unfortunately, we're saturated by social media with the outliers. So we see all the stuff that's screwed up. Whereas, if I look at all the young people I know who are in relationships and doing fine, and they're doing just fine. I mean, my favorite entertainment these days, bedtime entertainment, is what they call couples humor, which is very dear to me, which is where couples are teasing and playing and making mischief with you and pranking each other. And that's what a relationship that's good looks like. So, I mean, Francis, you seem to be in a pretty good marriage. I mean, I want to make a joke here, but you seem to be in pretty marriage, right? There's got to be some way I can say yes, but your wife holds you hostage or something, But I mean, you're in a pretty stable. I was married for 20 years. If I hadn't had cancer, I'd still be married to her.
Yeah,
So,
I think on this question, right, now that I think about it, because while you guys are talking about this, I've been thinking about my own marriage. Is when I guess also I was of the right age and a lucky time before dating apps, before the market just crashed in a sense. Um, I wasn't looking for a perfect mate.
that's right.
I was looking for someone who I'm compatible with to go build it
Yes.
together. I did not
Yeah.
realize until much, much, much later. Marriage is a lot of work.
Work.
Yeah, as you say, like we're in a good marriage. Yes, we're in a good marriage, but that doesn't mean that we don't have fights.
Oh, I mean, I love being married. Of course, I've done it 3 times, but I mean, mostly I was married to one woman for a long time. I just like to make a little drama out of claiming I've been married 3 times. Um, and it's a lot of fucking work, right? And you work at it constantly. But the Catholic Church did a great job on us, especially the marriage and family classes. You can be married to anybody. You can, you're not, that you are not troubled by looking at. And I thought that was profound. And so to me, whenever I would date a woman, when I'm in a relationship, I'm going to see if I can make a marriage out of it, or I don't do it. Otherwise, it's a waste of my time. That's how I looked at it. And so, the truth is that can you find somebody that's willing to work with as hard as you are toward bringing about holding this relationship together, building a shared homestead, raising a family, and taking care of each other? I mean, either that person wants to do that, or there's something freaking wrong with them. I think men. It's interesting to me that men appear to be more willing to do that than women. I don't. That just seems really strange to me, but that's what's happening. I lost the question because I know that there was more to it than that. Okay, this question actually disturbed me because I'm like, the state, they can't do anything right. Why would you want the state to do this? That's like the worst idea. Instead, you can solve this problem very easily by requiring real ID for all dating sites, and that you were giving accurate testimony, and that if you didn't, it was punishable. That would be really easy. The second thing is, don't put up pictures, put up videos. You can't tell anything from a photo and compare. I mean, you can tell a little bit. You can tell a certain composition features, but I mean, the minute you hear people talk, you find something else going on. But I don't really, I don't think you're going to get out of this problem with any engineering solution unless we engineer the restoration of the family as the primary institution of the government rather than the individual. And most of the work I did is restoring the family, the primacy of the family over the individual, because most of this stuff is is made on the individual basis. So yeah, but I should have the right to, instead of there's the production of the family, the production of the economy, the production of the polity. We need the family to produce in order to have an economy and a polity. The individual variation from anything that would make a family is a burden on the people that make a family.
Wait, say that again.
Any variation in the social institutions, norms, traditions, values, and behavior. In other words, anything that happens in the commons that is contrary to the production of a high trust intergenerational family, right, is an imposition. Anything that's contrary to that is an imposition of costs upon the people who are building the family. So what's happening is essentially a lot of hedonism is taking place. It's free riding on the productivity of families. And so that's the underlying issue. When I say the real problem is individualism, you know, I mean, there's individual property rights are great, but that's a negativa. In other words, don't violate individual property rights. On the other hand, then what's the purpose of policy? In other words, norms, traditions, values, legislation, and institutions. Right? That is the family. And if you look at what the world's complaining against when they talk about American decadence, it's actually that. It's the degradation of the family in response to the hedonism of the individual. And the hedonism of the individual turns out to be really, really bad. And we're experiencing the consequence of really, really bad. So I think this problem of dating sites is something we know. We just can't legislate it for some reason. We can't legislate anything. I mean, very little legislation is getting passed. Our government is frozen. And it's frozen because of this breakdown. This breakdown is due to the introduction of women and their expression without combined with the focus on individualism. We forget that individualism in the context of the classical liberal tradition is the individualism of the man in order to act in the interests of his family. It's not, you know, he's the agent that has the political action and the direction of the family, and the woman has the sovereignty over the children to bring that about. Right? That's where this individualism comes about. But the minute you say you take the family out of that equation and you make it about the individual and his freedom of expression, what you've now done is you've basically given license to the hyper-consumption of the commons in all its forms, instead of the preservation of the tradition of the investment in the intergenerational family. I read an article by some feminists yesterday, made me want to put her in the guillotine, you know, because she was trying to justify all this. So I don't know. All this problem you want to talk with dating sites, that's easily solved by legislation. Just as the problem with social media is, and free speech is solved by legislation. We just can't make it legislated without showing up with guns, and 2 million of them showing up with guns. As for this problem of identifying people, I mean, it's really easy to identify people you have compatibility with. It's not easy to do that except in a social group. In my experience, I met my high school girlfriend, first high school girlfriend was in my neighborhood. My second high school girlfriend was in my social group. My third high school group program girlfriend was the was friends. Her friends told her girlfriends told their boyfriends to tell me that she was interested. The same thing happened with my next high school girlfriend. In college, my girlfriend lived in the dorm next door. Right, we were together all through college. Um, and you know, my first wife was in my social group, right? She was in my social group. My second wife was the one I was married to for a long time. She was an employee of not directly, like she wasn't working for me, but she was an employee of my organization. And that's how I met her. And she's the only person there that wasn't afraid of me, which is why I liked her. Um, and she would stand up to me, just brave, powerful woman. You know, and that's how it works. And I think that the problem with people is that you cannot just pull people off the street and think you're going to buy people like an Amazon account. It's just not going to fucking happen. And that psychological problem, of course, is natural to women anyway. So, and then the women's hypergamy, which is another form of hyperconsumption, is highly unrealistic. So you're seeing the consequence of it.
I'll add about individualism that we've been treating it like an ideology that can be imposed on people, but it's a trait some people possess, and
Yes.
it's very harmful to people who are naturally collectivistic.
Yes.
Which is absolute majority of people.
Well, it's the same thing with markets versus subsidized markets. I mean, you know, most people are better off in the guild model. Some of us are better off in the entrepreneurial model, right? And that's really easy to understand because we have different capacities for adaptation. All right. And it's like, you know, a lot of smart people don't become rich. Why? Because they don't need to. Whereas a person at the bottom, in the bottom third, they need to find something that they can become good enough at and that's stable at, that they don't have to, that they can take the time to become good at something and then use their personality to sell it. So
When you say a lot of smart people don't become rich because they don't need to, is it because they don't, because of their IQ or allow them for certain pursuits, they don't seek that status hierarchy, or that they
already have it. They already have it because of their IQ. The second reason is your ability to do anything just is that you can just do anything. You know, you could. I mean, if you had to learn a new language or a new business model, I mean, how long would it take you? A couple of days, right? I mean,
You know, the interesting thing is, well, more than a quarter century ago, I was in Japan, and for about 10 months or something. And then our family's about to go visit Japan again, and I haven't really spoken Japanese for a long freaking time. But somehow, you know, I turned the switch in my head and started thinking like a Japanese.
Yes.
And then the language started coming back to me.
Yes, I do that when I'm around Russians. I can't think of anything when I'm by myself, but if I watch the news or I start listening to them, it comes back to me. Same with Spanish. My French and German were never that good. So shit, you just gave me now that you had a brilliant insight. I was going to run off. Anyway, all right, I'll think.
What the smart people and whatever.
Well, you just don't. You can adapt to anything, right? I mean, and the second thing is you're more likely. Um, uh, it's all sorts of weird stuff. It's really easy to entertain yourself if you're smart. Get a, right, you know, learn something. right? It doesn't require that you have other people and external stimulation or toys or tools or places or parties or stuff like that. You know, it's just all sorts of things that are just easier for you. So you because your adaptability and your self-sufficiency is sufficient that you're not at any risk. And that's why I mean, that's why I disagree with, one of the reasons I disagree with Taleb is he say, well, you know, the IQ versus income curve flattens out after a while. And I'm like, of course it does. That's a stupid fucking question, right? I mean, we just don't need to make more money because we probably make enough. And the second thing is how many customers can you have when you're at the right tail, right? You can't have that many people, and you tend to work on problems with really long-term turnarounds. I mean, it could how you know what would have happened if Beethoven could have maintained the income from the sale of his music, or Darwin from the use of the theory of evolution, right? I mean, these things have intertemporal values. I mean, I don't make money from my work. I made money from doing what we just described, which is I can learn your business model. I could probably spend an hour talking to you and write your goddamn balance sheet on the wall, right? Because I have done this a lot, and people are like, "How did you do that?" Because it's deterministic, right? So they're always trying to hide stuff from me. It says, you understand? I'm gonna figure it out anyway. So you know, it's the same thing in solving writing proposals, right? All right, I'll spend a couple of hours with you. I'll think about it for a couple of hours. I'll come up with the solution. It'll take me a day or two to write it down, and here's your fucking proposal, right? I mean, that's what you do. You learn things faster than other people learn them, and so the work of doing that isn't hard. It's enjoyable. Whereas you go to the 95 and below, actually go to the below 105. And those people, it's hard to learn something new. I mean, and the horror, one of the horrors in my life is the recognition of how fast logical capacity declines. I mean, I didn't realize it, how it's not a linear collapse. I mean, it's a collapse. I mean, you got people that can't handle. I mean, I had one yesterday. I was going to call Martin because I was having too much fun with him. Um, guy yesterday, and I was like, dude, you know, this guy can't put two and two together. I mean, you can't see a pattern between anything. And, you know, they're just frustrating as hell. So, I mean, those people need to find something they can be safe at. I won't make money from what I do. I mean, I might make the Institute make money, but for me, I don't care. All right, what's next?
All right. Question 3. Curt or Martin, a while ago, one of you explained how Islam was the militant variation of the feminine Abrahamic aggression. Can you discuss this further? How would you explain this to a young man who thinks Islam is a masculine religion? I thought didn't you just tweet about this?
I did, but Martin kills it here. So
The notion that it's a masculine religion is, to my understanding, based purely on it involving violence. This completely disregards the social structure based on feminine means of coercion, whether expressed by women or men, for ensuring conformity, which is inherent to all Abrahamic systems. To the extent Christianity was historically masculine, it was to the extent it was de-Abrahamized or Aryanized. Another justification may be that it's patriarchal, but the biggest enforcers of norms are women, including on other women.
right. Which this is, you know, sometimes I'm like, I wish I could say that as simply as Martin does. This is a great example of it. Yeah, it's based purely on violence. Now, and what people don't understand is what kind of violence is it? I mean, is it male violence in the European and East Asian sense, or is it feminine violence? Now, you might not understand this until you think about this, unless you know how violent women are. Women are more violent than men. There's more child abuse by women than there are by men. Women are more. How do women use violence? They don't. That's why they're confused all the time, because women perceive correction and discipline and as violence, but that's because that's how they use it. They use their coercion as violence. So when you say the spread of Islam is done by the feminine means, the Islamic religion is feminine. The means of their violence is feminine. And so we interpret this, but I think that's because, Martin and I have a very clear understanding of sex differences in cognitive structure, behavior, and speech and conflict, because we've we've worked on it in such excruciating detail. I mean, do you want to go do that whole thing all over again, Martin? Do you want to go through all that again? I mean, that was not exactly fun.
Which one?
What was what we were doing lying, lying and undermining. I mean, it's like,
That would take several sessions.
yes. so, I mean, it's all feminine. So when you say feminine, we have a very clear notion of what that means, and so we don't get confused between what is an the fact that it's violent as it's masculine violence or feminine violence. For example, why can't the Middle East produce a freaking army? Why can't they produce a corporation of any scale?
Well, they can operate as a pack.
Well,
They
it's
can
low
operate.
trust, right?
It's low trust, and they're not trustworthy. But it is there. They use the Abrahamic method of lying too, and lying is heroic to them. Isn't lying heroic and getting stuff away with stuff with women heroic? It is. They use it. They don't lie systematically like men do, but they do lie by their conversion into realism and from realism to approval and disapproval. That's the same thing why I was had this discussion with I don't know how many rabbis, and it's like, well, I mean, your culture, you solve for agreement, not truth. We solve for a truth, and once we establish truth, then we solve for agreement. You solve for agreement regardless of truth. That's feminine. I can't do better than Martin on this because I mean, if you want, I wrote the post yesterday, right?
Yeah, something like that.
So just search my feed for it's right Islam. Go to your search criteria and write Islam, feminine, and open parentheses at Curt Doolittle, one word, close parentheses. Search for that, and you'll get my post from yesterday or the day before, whatever it was. I had a lot of feedback on that. It was fascinating. All right, that's all I had to say because Mark killed it. It was all right. He hit it out of the park.
Question 4 from Carmelo. What is the NLI's official policy regarding every and each form of birth control? How do you regard its effects on society?
Again, we don't necessarily have official policies on everything.
Thank you, Mark. Say that again.
We don't necessarily have official policies on everything. What you're hearing is opinions of the two of us. Sometimes Francis chimes into that are then likely to be reflected in policies we suggest. Birth control was discussed in a previous stream on 29 December, but in short, pill is bad for its personality altering and long-term side effects, including on the environment after leaving the body. Aside from hormonal contraception, it's not clear that it's something that must be dealt with. Rather, incentives for people to get married, stay married, and have children have to be fixed. But I'd be ready to go there if that doesn't turn out to be sufficient.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Yeah, can I just
go there? It's not clear to banning it outright, all of it, if we need to.
Well, I mean, the reason you ban it is to force the discipline that produces marriages and families. I mean, that's the reason you ban it, because you create a scarcity of sex and a prohibition on sex outside of marriage. I mean, that's really.
Well, there's already scarcity of sex. It's not helping.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna try to keep a straight face for a second. Um, all right. So the only thing I wanted to bring up was Martin started this so beautifully. Don't necessarily have official policy as anything. There's a difference between a judgment, which is this is wrong, right? Right, which we can do. In other words, we say it's true, it's true and reciprocal, or it's untrue and or irreciprocal. That's a judgment we have. When we refer to policies, they're advice. Is that the best way to say it, Martin?
Yeah, I
Right.
suppose.
Policy is used to shape incentives, right?
Right. Well, exactly. I mean, there's so like I would say, there is perfect government, but that perfect government is on a scale that depends on your demographics and sophistication of your polity, right? And so we would say, you say, what's our policy? Well, our policy would be, here's what we consider perfect from, and here's how you vary from it, right? And Martin just said the same thing, which is in this case, hormonal birth control is really fucking bad. And the more we understand, the more that is central to the problems we're facing. Um, uh, the second thing is delayed relate marriage, which means that as we mature, our adaptability to each other decreases. So what you really like is the people to grow up in the same neighborhood, or sort of at least somewhat near to each other, have the same shared experiences, and start forming a relationship, in high school, and then have college brought to them rather than them brought to college. If you did that, you'd have the best continuity of shared experiences and the best potential of forming families. But if you're going to we do the opposite, which is we distribute people over the fucking planet. We put them into collisions. We generate. I'm not as concerned about ethnic homogeneity as others are, but we certainly generate cultural heterogeneity. And this means that everybody's worse, and then we create bad incentives in the economy, bad incentives in the law, and then we create hormonal therapies that basically make women crazy. So
More than they are normally.
we're crazier than they are normally. Though they're again, I going to go. I got to flip the side around and say, a woman's a woman, especially prior to our development of reason and language, the female needs to extend her nervous system such that she is aware and managing the her offspring as extensions of her. This this excessive empathizing in time and this excessive fear or paranoia, which we call what's the word? What's the big five word?
Neuroticism.
Neuroticism is is actually valuable in that case, because so when you're extending your nervous system over offspring, it's not valuable when you don't have offspring. So that's where this energy is going. It's the same thing for men. We have revolutions when there's unmarried men. That's why I think we're going to have one. Yeah, it would be because if you don't have that drive put towards family formation, it will express itself somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm
And
pretty sure Rudyard said it that way. When you have
yes,
all these unmarried young men, or young men will burn your society down if they can't settle and form family.
it's true. So, I'm uh, Martin killed it like he usually does with the answer about birth control. But I want to talk about, because we get this all the time. There's a difference between our methods, our judgments, our recommendations, and the policies. And policy, we generally say you want to work in these bounds. Does that make sense? You want to think about these bounds, but we don't go out and say it. And this is somewhat frustrating to people because they'd like us to be more certain, but we're not trying to satisfy just you, right? We're trying to make sure that we give a solution that's available for colony formation, and not everybody thinks and wants the same.
I think of it as what we here at the Institute provide as a technology.
Correct.
You can use that technology like any other technology to build stuff that suits your needs. It's not so
Yes,
much of we already give you a product and you have to use it or else.
I see. Yes, that's very smart.
Most of what we do is just think about causality, about incentives, pressures. So this is apparently very hard for most people.
Why is that, Martin? Why is that?
I think
It takes a very male brain.
it probably has something to do with time preference,
It's systematizing in time preference,
right?
probably, yeah. Yep. Empathizing in at high time preference and systematizing in lower time preference, probably that's all it is. It's probably and then
That's
at
what
IQ. Go ahead.
that's what all law is, including natural law. Just thinking about what the effects are going to be.
Yes. Yeah, we have, but we say this. I'm sitting here, and we got three guys who know a lot about the world. Sometimes I try to tell people if you want to argue with Martin, it's a futile process. I think the only thing we did this again. The only thing Martin and I deal with is you kicked my ass on yesterday, Martin, over the meaning of a word. Which what?
Yeah. Nationality.
What? Most of the time we like so, and I have one word I like to keep authority because I know it bugs him. So I use it. I keep the discussion alive just to get a rise.
Even though you've in the background changed the definitions in
Of
life.
course.
I said.
Oh, it's really hard to mess with you, Francis.
Why?
Is that
Because I'm too stoic?
exactly? It's really hard. Brad's the same. Okay. What's the next one?
All right, question number 5, also from Carmelo. How do you frame?
Okay, wait a minute. Are you going? Do we got to read this with an Italian accent? How do you frame a modern? How?
You're putting a tall order on me here.
No. I'm just teasing Carmelo.
It's still okay to be racist against Italians.
I'm not racist. I love Italians.
How do you frame modern and alternative forms of capitalism in terms of a civilized outlet for tribal societal dynamics?
In the first place, I frame capitalism as a socialist strawman and not an actual system, but insofar people have come to capitalism's defense, they're defending the rule of the merchants and their freedom to subvert and replace people for profit. Rule of law and nationalism would make capitalism impossible. Markets free of reciprocity are no longer free markets in the capitalist sense. But as to the point of the question, many men of civilized races have evidently found market competition to be a valid outlet and generator of testosterone, but it doesn't work for many others who would much more appreciate mindfulness that comes with permanent job security. And if the question is about tribalism as in-group preference, then as in everything, it's a winning strategy, and a group that is being meritocratic towards nepotistic group is effectively committing suicide on the markets and otherwise.
Martin, that paragraph is a fucking white paper. This is brilliant.
White in multiple senses, I suppose.
Well, it's very dense. There's a lot you're saying in the first. Capitalism is social strawman. Yep. Not an actual system. Yep. They're defending rule of merchants, the priority of merchants, but yeah, and their freedom to subvert and replace people. Yeah, that's a little. You're right, but I would just stick with they're able to trade at the expense of their people, right? Instead of trade while maintaining reciprocity of their people. So you hit this correctly in the next note. Realize Martin tries to say things pessimistically, and I try to say them optimistically, and the truth is somewhere in between. So rule of law and nationalism would make capitalism impossible. That's the important part, is that if we were to mean that you could not engage in trades, in other words, free trade, that was at the expense of your people, then you would never have capitalism. You would just have, what do we call it, Martin? Reciprocity, rule of law by natural law. What do we call that? There's no
I
name.
mean, it would still be obviously market economy, but I don't think we've had a name for that.
Market. It would still be a market economy, but not capitalism. Is that a best way to say it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we should just copy this and put this needs to be somewhere.
Well, I can work on it too.
It's fucking glorious. All right.
I think this whole capitalism versus what's the opposite, command economy or something, is just a diversion, right? It's a
Yeah, well, that's
diversion
why
that
they did it, right?
Every economy is a command economy. When there are markets, it's because someone commanded there to be markets.
I don't know if someone commanded there to be markets versus the markets just formed.
No, my claim is that markets do not like common market where everyone is forced to trade. That does naturally emerge. What naturally emerges is like guilds where people guard their opportunities.
You know, when you guys were talking about this, the idea that came to my mind was the Japanese structure, their social structure, before the Meiji Restoration, before the American gunboats and Western ideas went into Japan. They had a social structure where the samurai, the aristocracy, are at the top, then the farmers, then the artisans, and merchants last. Being a merchant, regardless how rich you are, in that society was regarded as a kind of a dirty job, in a sense. And but here's a dilemma, because in that kind of society it also stagnated, versus when you look at the Britain slash American model of merchants generate a lot of wealth, and that wealth allowed the country to develop at a very fast pace. What I do wonder is whether that fast pace of development under, quote, capitalism has its own seed of destruction built into it. As society became too wealthy, as merchants start running the show, it leads to decadence and therefore the whole recycling.
Yes, that's the idea here. For this posting it on Twitter.
Yeah, it's too good. That's too good. That's just too good to let go. All right. So he's Carmelo, you're like a productive question guy today. Okay, what's the next one?
Well, I think, what, 2 sessions ago, he was here live and he asked whether he should post the questions, and I just told him just go post them, and so he posted 3.
It's much easier this way. It's much easier to answer questions well in this frame.
All right, so last one from Carmelo. With the advent of new genetic technologies and fast-paced, I think it's fast-paced eugenic strategies, could we possibly ignore genetic evolution when attempting to craft social and economic policy?
Not anytime soon, and I would suggest we shouldn't even go there, as I can imagine all sorts of crazy malincentives and outcome with genetic editing when it's on the table. In the extreme, completely replacing Darwinian evolution. The outcome would be completely anti-human, seeing as humans are a stable product of Darwinian evolution and may not at all be stable within self-directed evolution.
Brilliant. Brilliant as usual. I'm going to add a minor clarification, because I've been working on this. I'm working on, we're doing physics and life in the book right now. And I'm trying to explain why um, evolutionary computation, especially genetics, given the tendency of molecules to form assemblies and genes to form assemblages, is that it's one thing to go to it's just turned out that this dance we call genetics between the cell, the environment of the cell, its nucleus, and the genome. This dance is extremely complicated. We can identify directions to it. We can basically understand how it works at the aggregate level. But messing around with this stuff is something that's going to be, if possible, in the far distant future. However, that said, there are, for example, here's an example of a complexity. The location of our limbs and location of our head and torso are stored in different places. So that's why you get guys like me. Sure. Right. 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 So how would you fix that? That's very difficult to change. On the other hand, there's a whole lot of SNP single mutations of SNPs that are easily corrected, and they're because they're not complicated. So it's generally easy to fix. It's one thing between fixing a known problem and um, and trying to improve. We do know how to make it so that we don't have lactic acid buildup in our muscles. That would be a profound increase. We know how to increase the heart and lung size. That would be a profound difference. We are getting to where we know why some people, I can't remember, something chromia, women in particular, can see more colors. We have a bunch of these things where it looks like these are possible improvements. That's one thing. Certainly, there's basically, this is why they got this thing, like Cheddar Man, who they claim Cheddar Man, Europeans were black. That's just nonsense, right? It's because there are at least 3 places where melanin composition of the skin is stored, and they're only counted for 2. They didn't measure the third, and so that turns out that no, they weren't. They were ruddy, like just like South Europeans are today. They were not black at all. So same thing for eye color, like blue eyes. The reason blue eyes we didn't know this till recently, our advantage is they actually provide a benefit of seeing in the dark. It's not a huge benefit. I think it's 10 or 20%, but it is a benefit to see with
Well
blue eyes.
suited for the dark forest of Northern European.
Absolutely. It's like a same thing. There's also different, like I have woodland hair, which is they call it, it's not light brown, it's more like a taupey color. And it's like the color of fucking bark, right? I mean, so you have these different things. You can make skin color, and you can alter skin color and eye color by changing eye color by, I think, 6 changes, um, at least mostly. Though you gotta understand that genes are probabilistic rather than deterministic. So it depends on the environment in which the gene is expressed in relation to other things that are going on. So I'm very conscious of what Martin is saying, which is natural selection, even if enhanced by near breeding, which is important, and a correction of simple but powerful mutations, that's probably good. But getting into like intelligence intelligence appears to have thousands of inputs. All right, because it's very complicated. Sure, well, but we can't go through people and change you'll end up with creating damage to the gene pool and making it worse, just as likely as you will the other way. So while at some point, if computation continues, this might be something that's there. Martin's incredibly accurate.
I, even if we like understand the whole genome theoretically and to get exactly the results we want, do you want people to start making centaurs or whatever? I don't.
Making
Centaurs or something.
Horse.
Oh, no, I didn't mean, I'm sorry, Martin. I didn't realize you were going that far. Yeah, no, that would be bad. That would be very bad. I can see people saying in my family line, what's the thing that Habsburgs have, that goofy jaw? Right?
Extremely masculine jaw. Oh,
Really, they look fucked up.
yeah, it can go too far.
Right. So I can say, well, fix this in our family, in our lineage, right? That's probably solvable.
Yeah, but can you open the bag and release the cat without it?
I think of it this way, right? I mean, yes, it's now as we understand the mechanism of DNA and genetics and so on, it's essentially become a computation problem. But whether we have, well, one, whether we have the computational power to determine every possible end state when you change something, or even understand all the mechanisms thoroughly that's involved, just that we can build a model to compute the end state, I just don't know. I think we may be getting ahead of ourselves in that sense, that we do not yet understand what every possible gene does. And also the other thing I'm going to use an analogy. It's like back in the early days of my career, we're working in Win32 kernel, which was written by much smarter developers years earlier. And then even fixing a bug back then can introduce a bunch of site
Oh yeah.
conditions that are unanticipated. And
Yep.
if we're talking about, fixing our eye color or whatever as simple things to do, you don't know what it's actually going to do generations down the line, just like those side effects of fixing a bug, let alone, doing a refactoring, and let alone designing something entirely new. Those are problems, computational problems on different orders of magnitudes of complexity.
Mm-hmm.
It's as much playing God. If that makes sense in any context, it makes sense here. And I'm saying we're not just playing better in this Darwinian game, we're completely changing the game. And
you were right though, Mark. It's going to
humans
happen.
may not be
It's going
victors
to
of
happen.
that game.
I mean, the CCP has definitely said they want to do it.
Designer babies.
Yeah.
I'd suggest something like, if you're gonna do this, we will nuke you. That should be the policy.
Oh, I don't want to go there.
I just kept on thinking about Wrath of Khan from Star Trek
Oh,
2.
yeah, I mean that's the mythological weapon. I mean the thing that you want to go with there is that they presume that with greater capacity came greater aggression. It works the other way around. So I mean, what we all would like is to have the physical capacity of Scandinavians and the non-aggression of East Asians, right? And that would be a really nice combination to have. Um, But
I don't know
so
if non-aggression is such a good thing.
well, I think non-competition and non-aggression are two different things. I mean, the evidence certainly looks like if the Chinese people were given small states and freedom of action, the entrepreneur, I mean, because we can see this in the Chinese diaspora, that how successful they are. I mean, just like the Jews, except people don't hate them. Um, uh, did I just say that? Damn it.
Well, people don't hate us, but the low neoteny races tend to prey on us.
Yeah, exactly. So
So that's why I'm saying low aggression is probably not exactly a good thing, especially if we humans, on a whole, someday encounter alien species. I'd much
okay,
rather be this what is it, a stratus adaptus than whatever.
well, I mean, okay, so let's just say we shouldn't expect genetic improvement to enhance aggression. How about that? Right, that would probably that was probably a
Yeah,
mistake.
it depends on what you're improving.
Yes. I mean, the guy who can run 75 miles and then do a 50-mile marathon. I mean, that fucking guy. I mean, how many people wouldn't love to have that capacity to
That's kind of genetic communism, as it sounds to me.
oh my God, you are just brutal.
Genetic communism?
Mhm.
Oh,
That's
you mean given to
they are
everybody?
giving
Oh, I see.
those genes to lineages that didn't earn them.
Well, that actually brought me. Well, I mean, I wasn't thinking in terms of genetic communism, but I'm thinking in terms of if one gene, well, let's say using Curt's example, right? We think that is such a great gene, we gave it to everybody. Well, I don't think it's a one-sided game. With that gene, with that set of genes, you probably somewhere you're giving up something else. And if we make the gene pool so homogeneous, then it actually becomes very fragile because that means a given virus or some sudden uh, event or black swan event can just wipe all of it out. It became
Okay,
when you specialize that way, it becomes less anti-fragile.
correct. Although, hold on a second, I'm trying to run with this one. Persistence running has been incredibly valuable for us. I mean, it's the what gave us the freedom to move our hands. It made us the super predators that we are. And that's simply because by being bipedal, we can breathe while we're running, right? And a lot of other animals can't do the same. So, so the what I'm thinking about is, well, there are things that are consistent with. I mean, what we gave up. I'm just trying to answer your question. What we gave up was digestion. So we can't we it's easier for us to starve in exchange for persistent hunting. That was a pretty good trade-off, right? We can eat higher quality foods with better density, but we lose the capacity to of a lot. We lose a lot of digestive capacity.
For the environment we evolved in is the
Yes,
master clause.
right. So I'm not really sure. Like when I think about a bigger heart, bigger lungs, because I know my business partner Jim, he's six whatever, 6'4", 6'3", and he's he's a rail, right? He's a big guy in a rail. But if you look at his X-rays, his heart and lungs are massive in there. The same thing with my wife. Laura can just I'm gonna go run 20 miles. Okay, okay, and me, I'm like, I can do two. I
Wait,
can
wait, wait.
do
But can they deadlift 400 pounds?
no, they can't, right?
Exactly.
So there are trade-off. But the point I'm trying to make is there are things that are probably consistent, right? And there are things that are probably not. I mean, we don't know what's happening because he doesn't build up lactic acid, in his muscles. So that this guy, um, we don't see any problem with women who can see whatever that chromia is that allows them to see more colors. Um, they actually can see colors that don't exist, right? They're harmonics of colors. So they see the colors that don't really exist except as qualia in the mind, which is fascinating.
Oh, so it's not a eyes thing. It's not a visual thing. They don't see outside the normal spectrum, but rather it's their image processing.
Right, correct.
Interesting.
I don't know. I know quite a bit about the visual system. In this particular case, I don't know about the structure of her rods and cones, but I suspect that it's the same stimuli or various, and their processing is different. Which is, again, watch my video on vision. If you haven't watched my video,
You have a
you'll
video on
understand.
vision on the
Yeah,
channel?
yeah.
Oh,
It's
okay.
Yeah.
I'll dig it up.
the foundations. I start with the nervous system, then neurons, then columns, then I don't remember what else. Microcolumns, then columns and regions. Then I go to all processing, and then somewhere in there is vision. And the one I keep writing and not liking is the one use that big diagram I do of the hippocampal region, um, which I want to do next, and then consciousness.
Mm.
Uh, Once I have consciousness, then I've explained the whole thing. So I have a couple more videos to make in that series. But if you watch my video on vision, you'll understand how it works. It's quite fascinating.
I remember watching the video on columns and nervous system. I don't remember whether I got to the vision part or maybe it's just got lost among everything else in that video.
Yeah, but it is that series.
That series. Okay, we've have we used up because there's two questions left. So
We did use our time. We have more than two questions, so I think only two questions for me. So we're gonna have to postpone it till next time.
oh, there's more. There's more.
Oh yeah, there's way more.
Wait,
We got to
I didn't
6,
even
we got
check the
7,
sheet.
and then a
there's
couple more from me at the bottom.
wow, these are really good questions. Oh, that's a Francis question. No wonder.
Yes, that's
Um,
my question.
There are two more in the sheet that aren't in the document.
Oh,
okay, okay. All right. So as we wrap it up,
yep, let's do it.
so what do you think about the quality of guys? What do you think about I'm going to move you over here so I can look directly at you instead of sideways. So what do you guys think about the questions we've gotten over the past? How long we've been doing this?
I want to say coming up on 8 months, 10 months. We definitely. Well, I mean, I think we started around what, June last year or something.
I think it was more likely the fall, but hey.
Yeah.
So the questions, it's interesting. The questions we get.
In October. Oh,
That sounds like right.
No, it
so
can't be
I'm looking at
October.
something else.
Okay.
I'll look it up.
In August.
August.
Oh, okay.
That's right.
There we go.
So what do you think of the questions, the kind of questions we've been getting?
I
That's
think
pretty-
we're.
Go ahead.
I think
Well,
we're
this-
doing our duty educating the audience.
Martin?
These ones are fun because I just enjoy whenever I have anything to say, especially if it's highly controversial.
Well, wait till they hear our topic for our summer. Summer. That's gonna be controversial.
Oh,
We can
yes.
frame it nicely, but yeah, we're probably going to get into it in lectures.
I think some of the at least one of the questions, one of the Q&A from today's session can fuel the summer convention, at least one of the presentations in summer convention.
What was that?
This is the one about, where is it? It's a one on women.
Okay. Oh boy.
Oh yeah, this one.
All right. All right. So do we get to say bye now?
Yes.
Okay.
Curt,
So,
sorry, would you mind staying after for a couple of minutes? I want to talk to you about the summer convention. Same as
and
Martin.
live. Okay. Okay. I'm getting used to you without the beard, Martin.
Well, don't get used to the walk.
All right. Hi, this is, thank you. This is Curt, Francis, and Martin for the Natural Law Institute. This has been our Q&A session for Friday, March 29th, 2024. Glad you joined us. Francis, where can they, or Martin, whichever one of you, how do they enter a question?
It's in the description of the video.
Yes, I put it in the description of the video. So every time after this meeting, I will place a placeholder for the next live session 2 weeks from now. In the video description is a link to the forum.
Excellent. And anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. I certainly had fun. Martin got to say some controversial things, so I think he had fun.
Yes.
All right. Did you have fun, Francis?
Absolutely.
All right, guys. I'll talk to you later.
Right.
Thank you again. Where's the end? Where's